Quotations from myself, segment 68, quotation number 862. We are quickly approaching the time. Some would say it is already here, but the most creative people will be also the least informed. For the real creativity requires an enormous dedication and huge investment of time in a single-minded pursuit of perfection in one's chosen field or subject. The same time which is more and more needed to digest and absorb the ever-increasing amount of new information. And so, in order to avoid the fate of proverbial one who went to the ground while trying to sit between the two stools, we have to choose now between being well-informed and being creative. 863. Marriage used to be like a tango. The leading partner, a man, originated, or thought he did, all the moves, and the lad, a woman, had to be nimble and clever enough to anticipate them and to create an illusion of perfect harmony. And if she did, the marriage was judged to be a success. Nowadays it's more like a disco dancing. Everybody is doing his or her own things, and it is hard to tell who is dancing with whom. Age 64. Every society exists and maintains its relative stability by imposing on its members a code of moral behavior and civic obligation, and having the majority to submit, however reluctantly, to them. Those few who are either unwilling or unable to do that, but want to escape the punishment for non-compliance, have to find a safe way to avoid what society demands from them as a price of membership. The membership in itself is of course unavoidable. No human being, or any other being for that matter, can exist alone. Most moral laws are directly or indirectly concerned with the preservation of the family, and the main function of the family is the production of the next generation. In this production, a woman undoubtedly plays a principal part as a primary caregiver, while a man's duty is to provide the woman with necessary support to do her job. Now, few men, for whatever reason, would agree to support a woman for a long time, if not for the sake of children. But even parental obligations are not strong enough to keep some men in the family. Yet, because of the prevailing moral laws, even such men look for some excuse to flee. One of the most common and even acceptable nowadays way of doing it is to embark on this self-discovery. That is to camouflage man's urge to escape his moral and social obligation as a noble and admirable quest for self-knowledge, and thus to avoid both the societal condemnation and personal guilt. In reality, it means that the husband who is tired and unhappy with the marriage and own parenthood discovers that he is ill-suited for both, and that his real destiny lies in having an affair or succession thereof with women who are much younger and better looking than his old lady. Needless to say, since women's opportunity to find a new and younger partner are much more limited, especially if she has children, it is not surprising that we seldom hear about women trying to discover themselves. 865. A person fully confident about what he wants is going to be, at least potentially, more successful in obtaining it than one who isn't. The same rule is applicable by analogy to socio-economic classes and their respective ideologies, which have to be ideally the true expression of what these classes collectively want. Thus, the class whose ideology is in better harmony with its needs is going to be better in achieving its goals. The politico-ideological right, which speaks on the behalf of the rich and those aspiring to be like them, obviously know what they want, which is very easy to state. Whatever I have, I want more, and after I got it, I want more still, and so on ad infinitum. They also know how to get it, their knowledge having been acquired through the practicing over several thousand years what they preach. Such a direct and simple congruity between the needs and ideology creates the inevitable climate of unity in the rightist camp. There is little ideological division in it, and any inner conflict results from the clash of personalities and not from the differences in view. Now, it cannot be overemphasized that this unity is largely due to the fact that formulators and practitioners of the right ideology are full-fledged members of the class they represent, which implies the intimate knowledge of its desires and total convergence of their personal interest within it. The same could not be said about political ideological left, for its spokesmen are very seldom poor by birth. Most of them grow up in the middle-class families and continue, the vicissitudes of life notwithstanding, belong there, if not economically, then culturally and intellectually. Consequently, their left ideology are, for the most part, not the natural outcome of their personal experience, but the end intellectual product of sympathetic and compassionate observation by the outsider of those who are less fortunate, or at best, the results of vicarious identification with the poorer working class by the one who is neither. It is clear for this reason that the ideological left is concerned about what the others need or want, which is not so easy to know and therefore has to be assumed. Unfortunately, those doing the assuming, the left intellectual and ideologists, often have little in common with the people on whose behalf they are making assumptions. For how the one whose ultimate bliss is to travel to Europe and visit the art museums can empathize with the one whose idea of good time means six-pack and endless watching of baseball or hockey game. And yet the first assume that they knows what the second needs or wants, which lead, despite the best intention, to the invention of various unrealistic schemes ending inevitably in disasters. The reasonable question to ask at this moment is, why don't the poor produce their own indigenous ideology, which truly reflects the needs and aspirations of their class? Now, if we accept that ideology is just another term for a particular philosophy of life, and to philosophize in the full sense of the word means first to acquire the widest possible knowledge of the subject, and second to connect all its numerous pieces in one coherent whole, logically valid, with a minimum of internal contradictions, and providing the ties of inevitability between the causes and effects. It is then perfectly clear that the poor, lacking the means of obtaining such a comprehensive knowledge and time to engage into long contemplation of it, just cannot do it on their own, being all their lives chiefly preoccupied with day-to-day, physical survival. Hence a seemingly unsolvable dilemma. Those who have the knowledge in time are no longer, if they ever were to begin with, a genuine member of the poor, and thus are intrinsically incapable to reflect its needs, while those who could have, the real poor, have neither. 866. First conceding that the Renaissance was a precursor and probably catalyst of the Reformation, then acknowledging that the Reformation, by shattering the millennial unity of Western Christendom, unleashed the demon of religious rivalry and strife, which has been chained for 1,000 years, and plunged Europe into yet another of its recurring paroxysms of barbarism and fratricidal horror, this time in the form of religion, and finally accepting the wisdom of the proverb that a tree is known by its fruits. Maybe the Renaissance wasn't such a great rebirth. The new promised new happiness turned out, as it often did before and after, to be the old nightmare, only under the different, artistically more perfect disguises, and also that the so-called Dark Ages were not so dark by comparison after all. For the superior quality of writing and painting technique are not the only criteria by which the age is judged. 867. Even if we allow philosophy to be called a science, it must be admitted that it's a very unique kind of science. For unlike physics, chemistry, medicine, etc., it doesn't produce any tangible goods, but is solely devoted to the enlargement of human understanding. And if in the process of doing so philosophy creates confusion, instead of clarity in the mind of the ordinary people, for whose benefits it's supposedly laboring, as it often does by contriving various esoteric concepts, and next engaging into the endless deliberation of them, then it defeats its own purpose, and makes its very raison d'etre highly questionable. For while the benefits of electrical light are obvious to anyone, whether he understands the theory of electricity or not, the benefits of philosophy, which does not make anybody by a few professional practitioners with, hopefully, more enlightened, is practically nil, and the attention and efforts of the reader and the listeners are wasted on trying to understand what the philosopher is saying, instead of being used much more productively in enlarging his own knowledge.